What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Sixers Digest YouTube channel. My name is Barnard, and the Sixers training camp is right around the corner, and the shoe has just finally fallen. A report has surfaced that James Harden is not expected to attend the Sixers Media Day on Monday for training camp, per Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm here to break down what this means, how much this changes out the outlook for the Sixers and James Harden, how much of a surprise this is, and everything else on the situation. But before I get fully into it, I would like to make sure that you guys are hitting that subscribe button. As of now, over 90% of you have not subscribed to the channel yet. We're really close to that 1,000 subscribers mark. We want to get that as soon as possible. So any one of you guys that can hit that button, make sure it helps us out here at Sixers Digest, and we got a whole lot more in store. So let's dive into things with James Harden specifically. So as I mentioned, per Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer, that James Harden is not expected to attend the Sixers Media Day on Monday. Now, for what it's worth, I do want to make it clear that Keith Pompey has kind of gone to Twitter and say that he did not speak it as definitive as this. I assume this is from his podcast that it was taken, so it isn't as set in stone as I think this report makes it seem, but Pompey is a guy that has at least a feel for the pulse of Sixers basketball, and specifically with James Harden, that he has some connection there. And I believe he was just kind of hinting at the thought process that Harden will not be in the building on Media Day on October 2nd. Now, it should be noted for starters a couple things here. Number one is the biggest clause that we keep coming back to with the Sixers is that a player who withholds playing surfaces called for a player contract for more than 30 days after the start of the last season covered by his player contract shall be deemed to have compelled for his player contract by rendering the player service called for thereunder. Accordingly, such a player shall not be a veteran free agent and shall not be entitled to negotiate or sign a player contract with any other professional basketball team unless and until the team for which the player has played expressly agrees otherwise. So that fancy CBA lingo there, what that means is that if James Harden extends this holdout for 30 days, that the Sixers will have the right to make sure he does not become a free agent at the end of this offseason. Now, it should be noted that the terms of that CBA dictate from the first game of the NBA season to the last game of the NBA Finals. So this does not interfere with this and will not be held against Harden. This is essentially a free holdout day with the media thing. And I believe it's the start of training camp, not just the season as a whole. So the clock will start ticking when training camp actually starts, but for media day, that this is a free day for Harden. Now, what does this mean from the James Harden side of things? I mean, for starters, we should not be surprised about this. I mean, this is the same guy that just went ahead in front of a bunch of random Chinese children and said this.
Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of again.
I mean, he hit us with the let me say that again. So he meant business then, and now he is clearly putting his money where his mouth is if he is to skip Media Day. Now, for the Sixers, I don't believe him skipping Media Day and James Harden not coming to Media Day really changes anything for them. To be honest, I think you can make an argument that this is a good thing for the players in the facility. I don't think it's the best thing for anyone to James Harden be having a mic shoved in his face and be asked about why he wants to be traded. That doesn't seem beneficial for anyone. That is why I think we're seeing the acceleration of all these things around the NBA, specifically with the Dame Lillard trade, that nobody wants to put these players in front of the media and have them questioned about all these things and just have these quotes flying around to all the aggregated sites so I can talk about it and all these other things that happen. That's what teams are trying to avoid, is this becoming more of a big deal. By James Harden staying away, I really think there's an argument to be made that it helps these Sixers. And these Sixers, unfortunately, are veterans to this holdout situation. We've sat through it with Ben Simmons. We saw how that went. It really did not impact the team that much, Ben Simmons sitting away. Did it limit them, their ceiling as a team, and I guess limit the overall expectations that we went through the whole first half of that year, knowing that there was not enough juice in the tank on that roster to truly contend. But then in came the James Harden trade midseason, and all of a sudden that did inject some life into the franchise. I don't think we're going to be looking at something as serious as this here for a couple of different reasons. Number one, let's look at this from the James Harden perspective. So I get it. He feels wronged. He wishes the team handled things differently. He feels he was owed more money by the Sixers is essentially the bottom line. That he's offended by the lack of offer. There was no offer in front of him. And while the Sixers state that this is purely by them following the laws, the regulations, and make sure they're doing everything by the book after being fined and punished last year, the reality is they likely did not have that strong of an interest in bringing back James Harden. Now, he accepted the player option for $35 million. He's made it very clear he wants to be traded and that he will never play for the Sixers again. But there is a point where he still has to kind of swallow his pride and do what's best for his career as well. And the unfortunate reality of that for James Harden is that causing a stink, being a hard-to-deal-with individual at this point in time, does none of those things. that we can already see, if anything, this summer should have been a wake-up call to James Harden. That I think he kind of had his back in the corner, took a look around, and all of a sudden realized, wow, the grass may not be greener, that there may not be another opportunity where I can be as heavily as a contributor as I am in Philadelphia while being paid like a legitimate star, because those days may be behind him. There's no longer a blank check attached to James Harden's name due to his services on a basketball court. There's other guys that have caught up to him for how good they are, and frankly, we know that he is on the decline, that it is very clear. And even though he is still well above average NBA player at this point in time, and plenty that he brings to a team, this is a guy who averaged 20 and 10 last year, who led the NBA in assists last year, who scored 40 points on 2 different playoff games. We know this guy doesn't suck. We're not saying that. But there is a point where the baggage gets too heavy to overcome a player's talents. And that's kind of the situation with James Harden, that we're nervous with all this going on, with all these swirling comments, with all these things. What happens from here? But for Harden, it doesn't do him any good to continue harboring that baggage, to keep bringing it up, making it more of an issue, because it only digs the hole deeper for himself. And the goal for James Harden is still to get one more massive payday. So what's the best way to get towards that? For starters, show up and play basketball. That we need to see that other teams need to see that. If you want to inspire a market for yourself outside of Philadelphia, then teams outside of Philadelphia need to see that you still have it and that you got it. So I think there's an end to him from that side of things. And while James Harden may very well live in his own world, that he may have his own perception of how things are, I think that's very likely the case. I have to believe that there are some people around him, his people, his management, whoever it is, who can at least speak some common sense on the situation. Because Harden is a guy who, we've known it for years in and for years out, and we know it from Daryl Morey specifically, that he more or less has been able to run the show. These stories of him flying in late to cities so he could enjoy the nightlife, or not flying with the team, not traveling with the team, these are things that date back to 10 years ago in his first time in Houston when Morey gave him the reins there. And that is normal. That happens for stars across the NBA. I don't want to say normal because I think Harden is a guy that has capitalized in it far more than others. We don't hear Jason Tatum doing this or Joel Embiid doing this or guys like that. We do hear this about James Harden and have for a decade now. But I will say that it's not, I guess, entirely uncommon for that to be okay for the star player. And now the issue does shift right back to when you're not the star player anymore. Are those things still okay? So when you can show up the night after going out and staying in the city and drop 50 pretty casually, it's fine. But when you're struggling to get through 4 quarters and you're turning the ball over and you're not having those consistently great games, it becomes an issue. But for now, the Sixers have to focus on navigating this as a team and making sure that the Harden stuff does not become more of a disaster. So for day one, say James Harden does not show up. Then what? Because training camp will be happening. Training camp will be in Colorado with the rest of the team. And at some point, Harden has to get out of his feelings and understands what best for his future career is to find a way to play. The 2 routes that can either be taken here is Harden swallows his pride and likely sets himself up for the best spot, or he just becomes so unbearable that the Sixers trade him for pennies on the dollar. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Neither James Harden nor Daryl Morey are the guys I would like to play hardball with, and both of them should know that about each other by now. That we know very well that James Harden will get his way, whether it is gaining weight, whether it's not trying in games, causing a bunch of noise in the locker room to upset other guys, or whether it's Daryl Morey just sticking a guy to the fire, saying to Ben Simmons, I will stare at you for 4 more years before I take a deal that does not set the franchise up for help. So I do believe in Daryl Morey to continue seeing James Harden and seeing this process out and seeing what comes of it. But it's also difficult to sit back and really feel good about a deal popping up that, number one, Daryl Morey's on board with. Number 2 is the answer to solving the Sixers championship hopes, one that will elevate the roster more than it already is. It's not a great spot for anybody, but this is not a situation that we should be drawn out and made worse. That the bigger of a deal this becomes, and I do expect it to continue that way, the worse it is for the Sixers moving forward. So for now, let's enjoy the day without James Harden at Sixers Media Day. I'm sure there will be plenty of takes to pop out of that, even without James Harden. I'm sure every single player will be asked about their relationship with James Harden and their expectation for him this year, and we'll have each one of these guys do their mental gymnastics to get through that line of questioning. But in the meantime, there's still a ton of questions to add. At some point in time, James Harden does have to show up in the building. What level is he at? How much he cares? What kind of shape he's in are all questions that I'm very curious the answers to. For now, I will be with you guys every step of the process. Once again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you're not missing out on any content here on Sixers Digest. I mean, what other Sixers YouTube channel is dropping these CBA clippings right in front of you for you guys to read there? And I understand that was a little more deeper lingo than I expected there, but regardless, I wanted to get the point across there. So thank you guys for tuning in. Drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on the Harden situation as a whole, and I will talk with you next time here on Sixers Digest. Peace.